All right, welcome everybody. As rationalists, we learn a lot of history and halakha. This is the kind of thing that I personally am into. But the thing that we get attacked, not necessarily attacked, but criticized for is it lacks feeling, it lacks emotion, spirituality. It's just an academic exercise. You're not religious if you're not doing these other things. Okay, well, I would argue that we are just as religious, but we just manifest in a different way. We are passionate and we demonstrate our passion through comprehension. So there's more than one derech out there, and the rationalism is ours. But I think it's valid criticism because we do talk a lot about history and halakha, and that can be dry and boring. So I want to focus on the areas that um, we can improve on, like character development, things that'll help our lives. And Rambam gives us ways to do that. With he's got a couple sections in his Mishnah Torah, which we're big fans of, Hilchot Deot and Hilchot Teshuvah. So I wanted to go through at least one of those. We'll see if everybody likes it. If so, then we'll continue going through the rest. Screen sharing. Let me add and here we'll go to Chabad, our favorite free website that we try to make as much use of as possible. Hilchot Deot. Maybe I should have pulled this up before we started. The laws of personal development, something everyone can benefit from. All right, do you guys see this on the screen?
Yeah.
Somebody let. Okay, good. I don't see any of you up here, so that's maybe good. Sometimes I like to hide myself. Anybody care to read?
In Hebrew or?
English, probably.
Oh,
We
yeah.
have a lot of
Okay.
non-Hebrew speakers here that wouldn't be able to follow. Anybody, go ahead. No volunteers. I'm gonna have to pick somebody.
I'm driving, Rabbi. Sorry, or I would love to, but I'm driving.
I know there's like 11 of us here. Somebody's got to be able to read.
Um,
Yes,
I'm trying to pull it up. If,
I think there's a way to make the text bigger on the screen, but I don't know how to do it.
yeah. Hold on a second. It's chapter one of the Diot.
Yeah, you see it on the screen here?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can just start there.
Okay. Um, I think I actually pulled it up. Uh, Included in this text are 11 mitzvot, 5 positive commandments, and 6 negative commandments. They comprise the following. 1 or 8, to imitate his ways. 2, to cling to those who know him. 3, to love others. 4, to love converts. 5, not to hate one's fellow Jews. 6, to admonish a wrongdoer. 7, not to shame. 8, not to oppress the unfortunate. 9, not to gossip. 10, not to take revenge. And 11, not to bear a grudge. These mitzvot are explained in the following chapters. Should I keep going?
Yeah, please.
Okay. Um, just pull it up on my screen so I can see better now. One, excuse me. Each and every man possesses many character traits. Each trait is very different and distant from the others. One type of man is wrathful. He is constantly angry. In contrast, there is the calm individual who is never moved to anger, or if at all, he will be slightly angry, perhaps once during a period of several years. There is the prideful man and the one who is exceptionally humble. There is the man ruled by his appetites. He will never be satisfied from pursuing his desires. And conversely, the very pure of heart, who does not desire even the little that the body needs. There is the greedy man, who cannot be satisfied with all the money in the world, as Ecclesiastes states 5:9. A lover of money never has his fill of money, end quote. In contrast, that is the man who puts a check on himself. He is satisfied with even a little, which is not enough for his needs, and he does not bother to pursue and attain what he lacks. There is the miser who torments himself, or miser. I haven't heard that word before. Uh, Let me start again. There is the miser, who torments himself with hunger, gathering his possessions close to him. Whenever he spends a penny of his own, he does so with great pain. Conversely, there is the spendthrift, who consciously wastes his entire fortune. All other traits follow the same pattern of contrast. For example, the overly elated and the depressed, the stingy and the free-handed, the cruel and the soft-hearted, the coward and the rash, and the like.
All right, very good.
Chapter
Thank you. So,
End of chapter 1.
yeah, it shows a lot of different character traits, and he's going to go into how some of these you're born with, and others are developed. And he'll go into more details. I think this word, I don't know how it's pronounced either. I guessed miser. That was my guess.
Yeah, I think so,
And
yeah. I'm looking it up now.
then when it says, whenever he spends a penny of his own, he does so with great pain. That reminds me.
It
My son was
means,
my
yeah.
son was little. He was telling me about a SpongeBob episode where Mr. Krabs got a bill for 1 penny and he started screaming, "No!" Thought that was funny. All right, so everybody understand the first halakha? This is like just explaining all the different kind of character traits we can have.
Hmm.
Okay, so on the following halachot, I've got the physical copy in my lap here, and I've highlighted some of the commentary. So if someone, and it can be the same person or a different person, doesn't matter, anyone who wants to volunteer, will read the whole second halakha, and then afterwards I'll go back to the commentary and we'll read what they say rather than interrupting in the middle of sentences.
Read it. Between
Okay. Oh, you wanted? I'm sorry. I thought somebody told me to read it, but go ahead.
no, I can read it. Between each trait and the contrasting trait at the other extreme, there are intermediate points, each distance from the other. With regard to all the traits, a man has some from the beginning of his conception, in accordance with his bodily nature. Some are appropriate to a person's nature and will therefore be acquired more easily than other traits. Some traits he does not have from birth. He may have learned them from others or turned to them on his own. These may have come as a result of his own thoughts or because he heard that there was a proper trait for him, which he ought to attain. Therefore, he accustomed himself to it until it became a part of himself.
Okay, thank you. All right, so that this first part here, between each trait, the contrasting trait at the other extreme, there are intermediate points, each distant from each other. I don't see any of us on the screen, so I can't see the camera, but in the physical copy, I don't know if you could see, it's got a line. If that didn't show up, just imagine drawing a line horizontally on a piece of paper. You have on one side it says stingy, on the other side it says free-handed, and then there's a dot in the middle, and there's a couple dots between the middle and each end of the spectrum. So there's lots of places you could land. You could be right in the middle, or you could lean a little towards the free-handed, or you could lean a little towards the stingy, like I kind of do. All right, so I've marked a couple of these that I found interesting that I'd like to read. With regard to all the traits a man has some from the beginning of his conception. Now I have 17. This one has 18. Um, what do I have in the physical copy here? Rambam distinguishes between genetic traits and those that are required. In accordance with his bodily nature, here we see an interrelation between body and soul. Certain temperaments are produced by or relate to particular physical characteristics. However, there is not necessarily a contradiction between what we find in Shimone parakim, and this halakha. The possession of certain character traits does not determine whether one will use them for a vice or a virtue. Some are appropriate to a person's nature and will therefore be acquired more easily than other traits. Okay, these are numbered different than what I have. Okay, let's see what this says. These traits are not transferred genetically. However, a person is born with a tendency towards them. In Shmona Parakim, chapter 4, Rambam elaborates on this issue at length. He explains some people are born with a brain whose internal chemistry is prone to intellectual achievement. However, if this person does not develop this tendency, he will not automatically become a thinker. Similarly, others have leanings towards courage or cowardice. Nevertheless, these are merely tendencies and they will not manifest themselves unless consciously developed. Also, these tendencies are, at all times, subject to a man's control. We are granted free will and choose our course of behavior. So, just because, I don't know, you're born with a higher IQ doesn't mean you're going to be the best debater unless you go out there and practice those traits. Kind of like some people are, I don't know, Arnold Schwarzenegger. He could become the best bodybuilder, but it's not going to just come naturally. He's going to have to develop these things. All right. Some traits he does not have from birth. He may have learned them from others. He writes, from his youth, one becomes accustomed to acting in accordance with the accepted behavior of one's family and locale. In these few words, Rambam includes all the people who might influence a person's character development, his parents, siblings, teachers, peers, and others. So this is why it's good to surround yourself with good influences. People that you look up to can have a very positive effect on you. And those are the types of people you want to emulate. I have 21 at the end of thoughts. They have it as 23. Or turn to them on his own. This may have come as a result of his own thoughts. An intuitive realization of the correctness of a certain course of behavior stemming from one's own creative thought. You may just realize, hey, this group is doing the right thing. You know, these people, they don't engage in drug use, and they don't tend to have criminal records. It might be kind of related. If you avoid these activities, you avoid these problems. Or if you follow these set of guidelines, good things happen. You go to work every day, you get a paycheck. You don't necessarily have to be taught. Some things you can figure out on your own. Or because he heard that this was a proper trait for him, which he ought to attain. Through study, a person understands the value of a certain character trait and sets out to acquire
Who's that? But that's a
it. I'm not sure if I have this one highlighted or not. At the end of this one, therefore he accustomed himself until it became a part of himself. Unlike the inborn or easily acquired traits, these qualities must be first accepted intellectually. Then through habitual actions, they become part of the personality. What is it they say? You have to do something for a certain amount of time before it comes a habit. So okay. Any questions on this one? All right. Any volunteers for Halakha 3?
Yes, Rabbi.
Go ahead.
The true, the two extremes of each trait, which are at a distance from one another, don't reflect a proper path. It is not fitting that a man should behave in accordance with these extremes or teach them to himself. If he finds that his nature leans towards one of the extremes or adapt itself easily to it, or if he has learned one of the extremes and acts accordingly, he should bring himself back to what is proper. and walk in the path of good men. This is the straight path.
Thank you. So extremism is always bad in either direction, and usually Rambam says where we belong is in the middle. One classic example of this would be alcohol. We include alcohol in our services. We do kiddush with wine, but we know some people struggle with it. They become alcoholics. They take it to the extreme. Say, well, if it's good to do on Shabbat, maybe it should be good to do every day. Okay, that's not the proper path. If that's what you're doing, you should bring it back to the middle. I only highlighted one here that I wanted to read, and this is throwing me off because the numbers that I have in my physical copy is different than what they put here. Walk in the path of good men. Let's see, what do they have here? Yeah, okay, so the path that good men follow. This translation is based on the fact that the word path is in the singular and good is in the plural. Um, so let's find it over here. So we see Bederech in the path and Hatovim. Lots of good, many different good things will come from being on one path. We feel that's the path that the Torah puts us on. So that's an interesting how they're making a distinction about the plural here and the singular here. Okay, bit of a longer one for number 4. Any volunteers?
I have a question real quick, Rabbi.
Yeah, go ahead.
On the Hatovim, does that have Ava or Hava in there? Because doesn't Hava indicate, is that love, or am I commingling?
Yeah, ahava is love. So what we have here
Ahava.
is ha here. It means the by itself. So tov is the word which means good. So we're adding ha, which is the good, ha tov, and then im is what's making it plural. So ha
Oh,
tovim
okay.
is the goods, the good plural.
Okay. I was
Yeah, so
adding
it
a
sounds
little.
kind of similar, but you're right. Ahava is love. And that's what I
Thank
was
you.
talking about before the class, the prayer book Hebrew made easy. This really lets you know hatovim sounds like a good word, but the shoresh, the root of it is just tov, good. See, we're adding an ending to it and we're adding a beginning, and that's where the grammar in that book it teaches you that. So you actually know more words than you think by understanding how these things are structured. But that's a separate topic. Okay, anybody for number 4?
Yes, Rabbi.
Go ahead.
The straight path. This involves discovering the midpoint temperament of each and every trait that man possesses within his personality. This refers to the trait which is equidistant from either or of the extremes without being close to either or of them. Therefore, the early sages instructed a man to evaluate his traits, to calculate them, and to direct them along the middle path so that he will be sound of body. For example, he should not be wrathful, easily angered, nor be like the dead, without feeling. Rather, he should adopt an intermediate course. Example, he should display anger only when the matter is serious enough to warrant it in order to prevent the matter from recurring. Similarly, he should not desire anything other than that which the body needs and can't exist without. As Proverbs 13:25 states, the righteous man needs to satisfy his soul. Also, he should not labor in his business except to gain what he needs for immediate use, as Psalm 37, 16 states, a little is for the righteous man. He should not be overly stingy, nor spread his money about. He should give charity according to his capacity, and lend to the needy as is fitting. He should not be overly elated and laugh excessively, nor be sad and distressed in spirit. Rather, he should be quietly happy at all times, with a friendly countenance. The same applies with regard to his other traits. This path is the path of the wise. Every man whose traits are it intermediate and equally balanced can be called a wise man.
All right, great job. Thank you. And also thank you for the bravery for taking on the long one. There's also a lot of commentary I highlighted in here. So a lot that I want to read. The straight path. This expression is also used in Avot 2:1. Avot means fathers. In his commentary on that Mishnah, the Rambam cites his explanation in the middle path in the fourth chapter of Shmoneh Parakim. Is that what I have here? 33. Yeah, okay. So just the commentary is the same, just the numbers are different. Yeah, I have 33 there, and they've got it as 36. That's throwing me off. Okay, sages. The early sages instructed a man to evaluate his traits. The Rambam appears to be referring to Sota 5b. Whoever evaluates his paths in this world will merit and witness God's salvation. 7. To calculate them and to direct them along the middle path. Here. At the conclusion of chapter 4, I want to go to the next one. 38 body, so that he will be of sound body. This is the one highlighted. We have enclosed the words of body with brackets because they are not found in the authoritative manuscripts of the Mishnah Torah, and they are problematic. Though a properly balanced temperament may also lead to physical health, this does not appear to be the Rambam's intent. Is omitted as suggested. The meaning of this would be altered from sound to complete or perfect. So the authoritative manuscripts of the Mishnah Torah, these are the Yemenite manuscripts. So this is one thing I like about the physical copy that I have here. The Elliot, I think the name, the Toger edition. Is that Elliot Toger? Is that the name? Yeah, Eliyahu Toger, which is the Chabad version. But the commentary here, it lets you know when what they're printing here deviates from the Yemenite manuscripts. So a lot of people want to know where those differences are, and this commentary points out the words and the slight differences that exist. Next we have to warrant it, number 40. Okay. To calculate them and direct, constantly evaluating your traits, to calculate them and direct them along the middle path so that he will be of sound body. For example, he should not be wrathful, easily angered, or be like the dead without feeling. Rather, he should adopt an intermediate course. He should display anger only when the matter is serious enough to warrant it. The Rambam appears to be referring to matters which evoke personal feelings. Nevertheless, the Misrat Moshe interprets this passage as referring to an instance in which Torah law would require a display of anger. The example given is a colleague's transgression of Torah law. I seem to remember this being taught here, that if you're a person that deals with anger, you should not display the anger. You should go to the opposite extreme and try and be happy so that where you end up is in the middle. And if there's an example where you need to display anger because you are a person that struggles with anger, you should only display the amount of anger that so you don't stand out in a crowd. Like this example, if a Torah violation is happening, the example that I heard was if there was a victim, um, and obviously the town is upset about what the criminal did to the victim, you wouldn't want to be going around being happy because you're struggling with anger, because then you would look out of place. So in that situation, you should display the anger just so you don't stand out. Everybody's upset about what they're seeing for a valid reason, whether it's a Torah transgression or public desecration of Torah, or there's a victim. But you're still working on your trait. You're only displaying the amount of anger so that people don't think you're some type of psychopath, because you know that this is something you're struggling with and you're trying to avoid that emotion so that after you train yourself, where you'll end up will be a healthy place, which is in the middle. That makes sense to everybody? Okay. In order to prevent the matter from reoccurring, that's when you should display the anger. Similarly, he should not desire anything other than that which the body needs and cannot do without. What did I have for one? And cannot exist without, as Proverbs states. The Rambam quotes supporting verses for only two of the intermediate traits, perhaps because his description of the middle of the road position for these traits might appear to veer towards one extreme. We might expect the intermediate point between gluttony and its opposite extreme to be eating to one's satisfaction. However, here we are told that we should desire only what is sufficient in order to exist. I've actually heard, I forget where I read it, but he makes the difference between how is, you might think gluttony, just eating and eating is, of course, unhealthy. But is it really worse to be a gym addict, and to be devoting all your time to going to the gym? I think he would consider that a different form of extremism, but just as unhealthy because taking time away from other things. So he doesn't want you to be an extremist in any category. In the middle is where he wants you to wind up. Okay. Also, he shall not labor in his business except to gain what he needs for intermediate use, as Psalms 37 states. Here again, the Rambam quotes a biblical verse because his definition of an intermediate path may seem extreme. The verse also clarifies that the Rambam is not denigrating the idea of work, but excessive preoccupation with one's profession as a means of acquiring possessions. It's highly unlikely that Rambam would criticize work per se. Note Proverbs, a sluggard go to the ant, see its ways and become wise. And Berachot 8a, he who enjoys the toil of his hands is greater than one who fears God. As it is stated, if you eat of the work of your hands, you are fortunate and will possess the good. Psalms, you are fortunate in this life and will possess the good in the world to come. Rambam himself quotes the later passage in Hilchot Talmud Torah. Thus, the Rambam is not criticizing a person for working hard, but rather teaching us that work and its profits should not be our greatest priorities. He should not be overly stingy. The printed editions, okay, this is another example of where they'll show you here where it says printed to mean close his hand versus the manuscripts will say gather. Similar, it's not like we're saying opposite things here, but these differences, they do make a difference to some people. Do not close your hand from your needy brother. Thus, the contrasting extreme would be free-handedness, like in Halakha 1, reflects miserly behavior, the opposite of which is being a spendthrift. The variant texts might reflect a difference of opinion as to which opposing extremes Rambam had in mind. So there's different places that you can quote from to see where they got that from. Friendly continence. Okay, he should not be overly stingy nor spread his money about. He should give to charity according to his capacity and lend to the needy as is fitting. He should not be overly elated and laugh excessively, nor be sad and depressed of spirit. Rather, he should be quiet and happy at all times, with a friendly countenance. In his commentary to Avot, the Rambam defends friendly countenance as a spirit of will and gentility. This is how we should be behaving, good to, friendly to be around. The same applies with regard to his other traits. That one I have highlighted. In Shmoneh Parakim, chapter 4, Rambam mentions many other intermediate traits. Among them, courage is the midpoint between arrogance and fear. Humility is the intermediate between pride and meekness. Earnestness is the intermediate between boasting and lowliness. Patience is the intermediate between rashness and insensitivity. One that I need to work on myself. I've always been a little lacking in patience. This is the path of the wise, those whose behavior is controlled by their intellect. Every man whose traits are intermediate and equally balanced can be called a wise man. Note the contrast to the pious of the following halakha. Though the published editions of Mishnah Torah include this line as the final concept of our halakha, many of the authoritative manuscripts place it as the beginning of halakha 5. So they're saying rather than ending here, this would be the beginning of this halakha in the Yemenite manuscripts. All right. We've only got 7 total. We're on number 5. This one's not too long. Any volunteers? Even if you've already read, you can read again.
A person who carefully examines his behavior and therefore deviates slightly from the mean to either side is called pious. What is implied? One who shuns pride and turns to the other extreme and carries himself lowly is called pious. This is the quality of piety. However, if he separates himself from the pride only to the extent that he reaches the mean and displays humility, he is called wise. This is the quality of wisdom. The same applies with regard to other character traits. The pious of the early generations would bend their temperaments from the intermediate path towards either of the two extremes. For some traits, they would veer towards the final extreme, for others, towards the first extreme. This is referred to as behavior beyond the measure of the law. We are commanded to walk in these intermediate paths, and they are good and straight paths, as Deuteronomy 28:9 states, and you shall walk in his ways.
Thank you. So we've got more commentary here than we do halakha. So a person who carefully examines his behavior in an effort to achieve the desired intermediate path means you're constantly examining yourself, which is good to look in and reflect. Sometimes it takes people pointing out to us, when we get set in our ways, and we encounter somebody that we disagree with. It's like, hey, the whole world doesn't see things the way we do, and therefore deviate slightly from the mean to either side is called pious. This one's longer than what I have here. Nope, this is a long one. Okay. In Shmoneh Parakim, chapter 4, the Rambam explains that one can refine and correct his behavior by balancing a tendency for excess in one direction by intentionally forcing oneself to adopt the opposite extreme. Not to end up there, but so that you end up in the middle. He continues, therefore, the pious did not allow themselves to fix their traits at the midpoint, but they would bend slightly to the side of excess or want as a hedge and a guard. He goes on to explain that, even for the pious, these extremes are not the ends in themselves, but a means to help them overcome natural tendencies. Thus, both the pious and a person of underdeveloped character may act in an extreme manner. However, the difference between them is that the behavior of the pious is carefully calculated with the intent of refining his personality, while the underdeveloped person does so without thought as a natural response to his whims and fancies. What is implied? One who shuns pride. At first glance, the choice of pride as an example. My phone was picking up what I was saying. At first glance, the choice of pride as an example is rather problematic because in chapter 2, halacha 3, the Rambam states, there are traits for which it is forbidden for a person to follow an intermediate path. Such a trait is pride. The proper path is not that a person should merely be humble, but rather hold himself very lowly. Therefore, the sages commanded, be very, very humble of spirit. It is possible to explain that because of the negative aspects of the quality of pride, the middle path that one should follow in regard to it does not resemble the middle paths of the other traits and may appear as an extreme. Pride represents one extreme, its converse being absolute lack of concern for self to the extent that one walks around in rags. Between these extremes are a number of intermediate points. Modesty, which might normally be considered as the intermediate level, humility, which Rambam considers as the true middle path, and extreme humility, which is pious behavior, according to the Lechem Mishnah. See also the commentary to the halakha cited above. Possibly it is the exaggerated contrasts in this set of traits that make it the most fitting example to demonstrate the principle of the middle path that Rambam espouses. The gross differences allow for the possibility of clear distinctions. Okay. What is implied? One who shuns pride and turns to the other extreme and carries himself lowly is called pious. This is the quality of piety. However, if he separates himself from pride only to the extent that he reaches the mean and displays humility, he's called wise. This is the quality of wisdom. 61 here. In his commentary to Avot 5:6, the Rambam contrasts wise and the pious. A boor is one who lacks both intellectual and ethical development. A wise man possesses both of these qualities in a complete way and is fitting. A pious man is a wise man who increases his piety, emotional development until he tends toward one extreme. As explained in chapter 4 of Shmoneh Parakim, and his deeds exceed his wisdom. Thus, the wise man is one whose ethical behavior has been developed to the point at which it reflects his intellectual sophistication. He's able to appreciate the meaning of each trait and express it within the context of his daily life. The pious man also possesses this quality, but due to his desire for ultimate self-refinement, he's willing to sacrifice himself and tend slightly to the extreme in certain instances. Although in this halakha, the Rambam differentiates between the middle path, the path of the wise, and beyond the measure of the law, the path of the pious. In Hilchot Yesodei HaTorah 5:11, he describes how, according to the greatness of the sage, so should be the care he takes to go beyond the measure of the law. Thus, it appears that a truly wise man will ultimately seek pious ways. Measure of the law is the next one that I have highlighted. Where is that? Okay, the pious of the early generations would be, I'll just say right here after what I just read, I mean, this really reminds me of Asher. You know, when you see people being nasty to him and calling him names, his natural response has got to be something other than being as calm and cool and collected as he is. And that type of behavior takes training. And I think him just doing it so often, he's able to do that and keep his anger under control. And that's the kind of thing we were talking about earlier about who you surround yourself with and role models, the kind of behavior that you should emulate. And that's one of the reasons why I miss him being on YouTube, because I miss a lot of these examples since I'm not on TikTok. Okay,
Is it okay if I say something?
yeah, go ahead.
It's interesting. The term they use here, it's Nikra Hasid, the wise Hasid or the wise pious. So I just see that's just so interesting because Hasid means pious.
Yeah.
So the whose shuns pride is known as is known as a Nikra Hasid. That's what the text says. So it's just funny. So and applying that to Asher, Asher's a Hasid.
I thought you were going somewhere else with it. There's people that push the Noahide scam, and they say because it's mentioned one time in Hilchot Malakum that these are if you follow the 7 laws, then you get nothing. As if Rambam decides who goes where in the world to come. Olam Haba.
That's true.
But he says you
You're
get
right.
nothing if you follow all 7 laws. Nothing. You have nothing to expect. But if you follow the 7 and you believe the Midrash that this was given to Moses at Mount Sinai, which is not listed in the Halakha L'Moshe Sinai, and Rambam's introduction to the nation, then you are considered one of the wise of the nations. So there's people pushing the Noahide scam that say, well, if you're one of the wise people, then this is like a separate category of Noahides. But here we see this is not some separate category. These are just wise people, you know?
Yep. That's right.
So I thought that's when you pointed that out, that's where you're going with it.
That's cool too.
Where were we? The pious of the early generations. Um, measure of the law. Okay, that's the next one I've highlighted. Would benefit their temperaments, um, the intermediate path towards either of the two extremes. For some traits, they would veer towards the final extreme. For others, towards the first extreme. This is referred to as a behavior beyond the measure of the law. I have 66 here. This is another long one. We find this expression used in a number of Talmudic passages. For example, Bava Metzia 30b relates that Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Yossi's son, was on a journey. A porter traveling the same road asked him to help lift a load of wood. Rabbi Yishmael was a distinguished scholar, and therefore this base task would have been demeaning for him. Nevertheless, rather than refuse the porter entirely, Rabbi Yishmael purchased his entire load from him. This was considered a behavior beyond the measure of the law. See also Berachot 7a, 45b, Bava Kama 100a, Bava Metzia 24b. Okay, so these are sources where we can find lots of examples of this behavior. However, in these and other Talmudic passages where the term is used, the emphasis appears to be on the ethical or the legal imperative involved, without stressing the aspect of character development. Note Hilchot Aveda 11.7, the Shulchan Aruch, Hoshen Mishpat 259.3 and 263.3, and Sefer Mitzvot Katan, Positive Commandment 49. I mean, do we ever run out of books we can read and compile sources from? Which
Never.
mention our obligation to go beyond the measure of the law. Thus, the Rambam appears to be merely borrowing the term used by the sages without referring to any specific instance. The path of behavior prescribed by one's intellect corresponds to law, and an intentional deviation from that course for the sake of piety is beyond the measure of the law. This is why I'm of the opinion that less is more. We can just stick to Rambam. It's enough to keep you busy for a lifetime. Okay, I have another one highlighted here. We are commanded. It's this one. The Sifri states on Deuteronomy 13:5 states, "You shall walk after God your Lord." This is a positive commandment. All right, we're quoting the Zohar here. Also makes a similar statement. However, neither source elaborates. Among the Geonim, this is the generation right before Rambam, the Baal Halachot Gedolot does, however, list it as a commandment. Rav Sadia Gaon does not include it as a specific commandment. Sefer HaMitzvot, positive mitzvah 8, and Sefer HaChinuch, mitzvah 610, include this as one of the Torah's 613 mitzvot. Going back to what are we talking about here? You shall walk after God your Lord. The Rambam's inclusion of this commandment as one of the 613 mitzvot is somewhat problematic. In Shoresh 4 of his introduction, Sefer HaMitzvot, he states that he does not include any general mitzvah which does not involve a specific activity in his reckoning of the 613 mitzvot. For this reason, observe my statutes, Leviticus 19:19, or be holy, Leviticus 19:2, are not included in the 613 mitzvot. On the surface, the command the Rambam mentions here also seems to be an all-encompassing charge to develop ourselves spiritually without any specific activity. Rav Avraham, the Rambam's son, was asked this question, and he explained that here the specific activity implied by this commandment is the development of our emotions and our character traits. A somewhat deeper perspective can be gained from the Rambam's own description of the mitzvah when listing the mitzvah at the beginning of these halachot. He states that the mitzvah is to imitate God's ways. And in Sefer HaMitzvot, he defines the mitzvah as to imitate him. Blessed be he, to imitate God, according to our potential. That's a really powerful statement because we know for Rambam to include something as a mitzvah, this is what they were criticizing, it has to be specific. And this is one that's not specific. So how do we follow God's ways and walk in his ways? What's the specific thing that I can point to that I could say I did it or I didn't? I did put on tefillin or I didn't. I did put on tzitzit or I didn't. I did comply with halacha or I didn't. Well, the problem they're pointing to is for this mitzvah, there's not a specific thing that we could say, but we're all individuals. And this is where it's pointing out what Rambam's son said, according to his potential. Asher may have achieved an ability to remain calm and not argue and yell and name call when people are mistreating him. Great. Did I achieve that? No. But maybe he wasn't struggling in that area. He just had to improve a little bit. Where me, I've been working on this for more than a decade now. Still haven't come close to his level of patience, but I've made bigger leaps and bounds because this was a bigger struggle for me. So I'm going to achieve as much of my potential as I can. But that doesn't mean that we all have the same potential. So this is where I think we're not judged on what did you objectively achieve, but how much of your available potential did you achieve? Did you work on? So to me, that was a really powerful statement. That's why I highlighted that one. Okay,
Now,
go ahead.
Now, in the same token, they said, reading the commentary from Rav Toger, he said that it's included as a mitzvah, right?
Depending on who you're quoting, Rambam does include it, but there are others who don't.
So it says the Hilchot. It says basically in the term The path is like the path of halakha in
Uh,
Hebrew. So it's
well, that's something you're objectively commanded to follow. If this is the
so
halakha, this is the law, you have to do it. But to
so
walk after God, walk in his ways, that seems a little more vague.
yeah, so what I'm wondering is he playing on words? Like we are commanded to walk the intermediate path.
That's his interpretation of it. Yeah.
It says halachta. So is he playing on words that is it like saying by following halakha, this is the intermediate path?
That's a good thing to point out. I mean, as opposed to it's a good path. I think that's our
Yeah,
claim.
it is. And I'm wondering if that's what it is. I don't know. Just throwing that out.
Yeah, it could be. That's a good observation. All right, we got two left. This one, number 6, is a short one. Anybody?
Yes, our sages taught the following explanation of this mitzvah. Just as he called gracious, you shall be gracious. Just as he is called merciful, you shall be merciful. Just as he called holy, you shall be holy. In a similar manner, the prophets call God by other titles: slow to anger, abundant in kindness, righteous, just, perfect, almighty, powerful, and the like. They did so to inform us that these are good and just paths. A person is obligated to accustom himself to these paths and to try to resemble him to the extent of his ability.
Great, thank you. So I've got a lot of reading to do here. Okay, our sages, and then I have commentary here in the physical copy, which is not on this website. So Chabad.org has omitted it. Let's see what it says in the physical copy. Our sages, that's 70. The Rambam appears to be referring to the Sifri, which he quotes in Sefer HaMitzvot. That explanation is also paralleled in the Mechilta, Exodus 14:2, and Shabbat 133b. It must be noted that other Talmudic and Midrashic sources interpret the commandment to imitate God in a different light. Note Sota 14a. Deuteronomy 13:5 states, "You shall walk after God your Lord." Is it possible for a man to walk after the divine presence? Has it not been stated, "Behold, God your Lord is a consuming fire"? Deuteronomy 4:24. Rather, it means one should follow the qualities of God. Just as he clothes the naked, you too should clothe the naked. God visited the sick, you too should visit the sick. God comforted the bereaved, you too should comfort the bereaved. God buried the dead, you too should bury the dead. In Sefer HaMitzvot, the Rambam mentions emulating both God's deeds and his qualities. Similarly, Sefer HaChinuch, in its description of this mitzvah, and in the Kriyat Sefer in his commentary, both here in Hilchot Deot and also in Hilchot Evel, mention both deeds and qualities. There is not necessarily a contradiction between these two emphases. As mentioned above, our actions reflect our personalities. Therefore, it follows that developing our characters in the manner outlined by the Rambam in this halakha will ultimately produce the good deeds mentioned by our sages in the passage from Sota. Nevertheless, deed is often not a reflection of character. A person with many severe character faults may still do good deeds. Hence, for the resemblance of God to be complete, it is not sufficient merely to perform positive deeds. Rather, a person must undergo an internal change by developing his character. Therefore, the Rambam focuses more on this aspect of the commandment. All of that off after these two words, our sages taught the following explanation of this mitzvah. They have 75 here, I have 71. The Rambam composed the Mishnah Torah with the intent of revealing all the laws to the great and to the small with regard to each and every mitzvah. He does not mention philosophical and ethical concepts unless they are halachot, practical directives for our behavior. In this context, we can understand the structure of this chapter. The Rambam set out to describe the mitzvah of the following God's ways. As stated in this halakha, he perceives this to mean developing our personalities by emulating the qualities which the Creator reveals. As he states in the following halakha, those qualities are identical with the middle path of human behavior. Therefore, in the initial halachot of this chapter, the Rambam sets out to describe the nature of human personality and the ideal temperaments, the middle path, that man should seek to achieve. Having laid down this foundation, he is able to define that mitzvah in this halakha and begin offering directives for its fulfillment in halakha 7. Okay. The like. Okay. Just as he is called gracious, you shall be gracious. As he's merciful, so shall you be. As he's holy, you should be holy. Okay, in a similar manner, the prophets called God by other titles: slow to anger, abundant in kindness, righteous, just, perfect, almighty, powerful, and the like. In Hilchot Yesodei HaTorah, that's the first section in this book, Sefer Hamada, first book in Mishnah Torah, in chapter 1, Halakha 11 and 12, and in detail in the Mori Nevukim, the Guide for the Perplexed, volume 1, chapters 53 and 54. The Rambam explains that these names are not descriptions of God, for he cannot be defined by any specific quality. To do so would limit him and detract from his infinite and transcendent state of being. Rather, the use of these titles must be understood as follows. God brings about activities which, had they been carried out by a man, would have been motivated by these emotional states. For example, instead of utterly destroying the Jews after the sin of the golden calf, God allowed our people to continue to exist. Were such a deed to have been performed by a human ruler, we would describe him as slow to anger. Though that term cannot serve as a description for God, for he cannot be described, the Torah and the prophets referred to him by such terms to teach us to emulate that quality. Okay. So because humans are not God and God is not human, we humans have emotions. We can't describe him as that. We can just look at his actions and describe if a human behaved like that, it would be based on the emotions that humans have. But because God's not human, we have a sort of problem attributing that to him. They did so to inform us that these are good and just paths, i.e., God acted in ways which we identify with these qualities, and the Torah and the prophets mention these actions, because these are attributes which man should strive to achieve. And the last one, a person is obligated to accustom himself to these paths and try to resemble him to the extent of his ability. There's that language again. For man is ultimately finite in nature and no true resemblance is possible. So we have a limited amount of time on this earth, so we have to get busy to the extent of our ability to reach our maximum potential. All right, last one. Who would like to take the last one? Anybody?
Yes, Rabbi.
Thank you.
How can one train himself to follow these temperaments to the extent that they become a permanent fixture of his personality? He should perform, repeat, and perform a third time the acts which conform to the standard of the middle road. Temperamentally, he should do this constantly until these acts are easy for him and don't present any difficulty. Then these temperaments will become a fixed part of his personality. Since the traitor is called by these terms and they make up the middle path, which are obligated to follow this path, is called the path of God. This is the heritage which our patriarch Abraham taught his descendants, as Genesis 18:19 states, "For I have known him so that he will command his descendants to keep the path of God." One who follows this path brings benefit and blessing to himself, as the above verses continues, so that God will bring about for Abraham all that he promised.
That's it. All right. Thank you, Rosalind. Um, I wish these numbers lined up with what I have in the physical copy to make it easier. Should do this constantly. Difficulty. Okay, he should do this constantly until these acts are easy for him to do and do not present any difficulty. There, I have a trait possessed by a person produces activities naturally and spontaneously. However, if one has not acquired a trait as yet, certain actions will be foreign to his nature, and one must trouble himself to perform them. For example, a liberal man gives to charity naturally, the miser must force himself to give. The action for each is the same, but not the inner feelings. Then these temperaments will become a fixed part of his personality. If the miser continues to give frequently, he will find that he no longer feels like a miser, but has become liberal in heart as well as in hand. Now, I would argue there's a difference in where you're giving. Um, if you have panhandlers that are known drug addicts, maybe don't give them $1 every time you see them. Instead, you could give $1 to your tzedakah box, even if it's just $1 a day. Then once it's full, you could take that to a yeshiva, and you can donate the whole thing to them, because that can be used, for a teacher to be teaching in Hebrew school. So just because you're giving, that can train you to give, but I think you should still be mindful of where you are giving. Okay. The path of God. Okay. Since the Creator is called by these terms and they make up the middle path, which we are obligated to follow, this path is called the path of God. As stated in the commentary to the previous halakha, the path of God involves controlling our emotions by using our intellect, so that our behavior is, to the extent that it is possible for man, an objective response to a situation. In this manner, our behavior bears a resemblance to God's transcendence of worldly matters. His descendants. This is the heritage which our patriarch Abraham taught his descendants. See the Midrash Tanchuma, Shoftim, section 15. And what are the ways of God? Righteousness and justice, as it is stated. And they will keep the path of God to do righteousness and justice. Genesis 18:19. For I have known him so that he will command his descendants to keep the path of God. Since the path of God is mentioned in the context of Abraham's service, it appears that walking in those ways is not synonymous with the performance of the 613 commandments. for they had not been given in Abraham's time. Rather, it must refer to ethics, qualities like righteousness and justice, which are mentioned in that verse. Kind of debunks the theory that we've had the Torah the whole time, since the days of Adam. And then the last one who follows this path to bring benefit and blessing to himself, as the above verse continues, so that God will bring about for Abraham all that he promised. The Rambam concludes his description of the obligation to develop our characters with the assurance that ultimately this course of behavior will bring us benefit and blessing. And that concludes Hilchot Deot. So hopefully everybody will use this to work on their own developments, and then collectively we'll see a difference. But also, as an individual level, I mean, I think this is good to have you something to evaluate yourself. And as individuals, we struggle with different things in different areas. You know yourself better than anyone else does. So I think this is where we should have introspection. This is another thing about the people fasting and withholding things like haircuts, and showers, laundry. It's not about withholding yourself from food. It's about introspection, and that can be done without physically torturing yourself. You can do that intellectually just by examining your own behaviors and your own inner emotions. All right, that's enough for the lecture. Bezrat Hashem, we'll see you all here next week.
Bezrat Hashem.
Thank you. Thank you, Rabbi. Appreciate it.
Yes, that was good, Rabbi. Thank you.
Mhm.